Okay, here we are back at, this is take 2, which you don't know because you never saw take 1. It's a total disaster. No, I'm just kidding. So we had a little bit of technical difficulty, a little bit of rabbinic error, and here we go. So, Rabbi Saroken, we're going to talk about Vayishlach.
Yep.
Yeah, one of your favorite Torah. I love Vayishlach.
I do.
think it's a great Sedra, a great Parsha. But maybe give folks just a little bit of a kind of narrative on one foot, what's happening here, who are the major players.
Yeah. So actually, in order to dive into this week's Torah portion, you really almost need to go back into the past week's Torah portion, because what you see is that Jacob and Esau, two brothers, twins really, have had this sort of falling out. A whole bunch of reasons going into that, but one is there was sort of a trickery / deception twice over, which was that Jacob early on in what I imagine to be their teenage days tricked Esau, or I don't even know if that really was a trick. I guess maybe you can't say that was a trick. He sort of took, well...
It was manipulative, I think, you know.
Yeah. So he came in from hunting. He was really hungry. Esau. Yeah. Came in from hunting. He was really hungry. Jacob, his brother, was at the stove making a delicious stew, and he said...
Jen Eyre. Jen was a nice...
And he said, give me some of that soup that you're making, that stew. And he said, sure, I will give it to you if you give me your birthright. And Esau responded saying, like, what good is it? What good is a birthright if I'm dead of hunger? Fine, deal. And then later on, when their father, Isaac, was really on his deathbed, he was about to give Esau the birthright, and Jacob pretended to be his brother, and so he received that blessing and that birthright. So basically, Rebecca, mom, overhears Esau sort of screaming out, saying, "I'm going to kill my brother," and she says, "Jacob, quick, run back to my hometown, stay there till I let you know otherwise that it's safe." And that's where we sort of see the two brothers parting. They've spent decades at this point not in relationship with one another. Clearly, it's deeply impacted both of them, but both Esau and Jacob have gone on in their adult lives to be quite successful, however you measure that, right? They've both found spouses, they've both had many children, they've both had acquired, possessions and wealth, and they've sort of done well for themselves by, any standard.
Yeah.
And so here, what we see happening as we open up this week's Torah portion is that that Jacob is ready. Like, he finds himself sort of perched in that place where he feels like he wants to go and make amends or reconcile with his brother Esau. And he has a lot of concerns about how he's going to be received, how that's going to go, what's going to happen. And, his sort of worst case scenario, catastrophic thinking, which might not be too far of a stretch, is that what Esau is going to want to do is kill him, because that's, the last he heard his voice, that was what Esau said.
Right.
And so he sort of prepares for that battle, and I think at the same time hopes that maybe they can reconcile.
Right. And just for folks who don't know, the Esau is Esau. Mm-hmm. Esau's the Hebrew for Esau. So it's Jacob and Esau, the classic rivalry, the struggle between the brothers, which is a theme of the Torah.
Yep.
Right? And the Bible, actually, in general. It's a theme there. And so here, Jacob is returning to the land of Israel. He's been away for 20 plus years. He's coming back. And it seems like the first thing he has to do is to kind of work through this issue with his brother.
Yeah.
And there's this very, very famous beginning to the Parsha, where Jacob goes through all these preparations and he's trying to get everything set. He sends part of the camp, his camp, which has grown, and as to your point, he's a wealthy man at this point, possessions and children, and he sends part of them here and part of them there, and then he's left by himself. It's really a very interesting moment in the Torah. Vayivater Yaakov levado.
Yeah.
And there he is by himself. And then it's Vayavek Ish Imo Adalot Shachar. And this mysterious stranger comes, and there's a wrestling. And of course, the question is, who is the stranger? What's the identity of stranger? Any thoughts on that?
It's funny. I know this is like you love that sort of wrestling in the dream and sort of all of those different possibilities of who it is. I'm sort of comfortable. This is one of those areas where I'm sort of comfortable with the unknown of it. Like, I feel like there's probably a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like, part of the struggle for sure is his own internal struggle with his own actions, behaviors, what has happened in the past, what's about to happen, still to come. It's like that sort of unsettled dream sequence that we have. And then I think that, there are some that say, it's an angel of God that he's struggling with.
That's the shot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the plain mening of the text, because it comes back and it says there was an angel. Yeah.
And then they sort of get into this battle, and he's like, bless me. Like, tell me what you love about this. And how do you understand this angel wrestling?
Yeah. So, I think to me that there are these three possibilities, that either it's Esau, and Esau comes and they kind of get their cards out on the table, and have this moment of, expressing the hurt, the anger, the whatever, and just do it kind of face to face. B, maybe it's an angel or, some kind of messenger sent from the divine, or C, it's Jacob wrestling with himself, his own conscience. He's got a lot on his mind. If reviewing his behavior. Last time I was with my brother, what did I do to him?
Yep,
like,
absolutely.
And
the time before that, right?
I mean, really, it's a very. I thought it was interesting. By the way, we had the rabbinic student from JTS here, Bennett Decker, over Shabbos. It was really great to have him here, and it was wonderful for the shul to meet him and for him to have the experience of Bethel. And in his remarks, one of the things he said, which you said it struck you, to me as well. He said that at the end, Jacob, as a trickster, which is certainly part of his person, he is tricked.
Yeah.
In the end, with the whole business of the brothers, his sons saying, no, Joseph has been killed, right?
We're going to get to that later.
Yeah, we will.
That's going to be months down the road.
We'll get to that. Yeah, exactly. So I like the sense of Jacob wrestling with himself. I mean, those three things are not mutually exclusive.
Right. I agree, because the wrestling with himself doesn't actually make sense of, he gets hurt. Right, like Jacob comes out of this wrestling match limping, forevermore, and he also, like, what does it mean that he's saying, like, that there's sort of this bless me moment coming out of this wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, who is it that's asking for the blessing, and why, and what's that urgency over being blessed?
Well, right. I mean, there are interesting echoes there with Esau asking Isaac for the blessing after Isaac's given it away to Jacob.
Yeah.
Right?
Or an angel, right? Like an angel of God saying bless me. Like, that too is weird.
Yeah. And then, of course, the sort of peak moment of the story is the change of the name.
Yes.
From Jacob, and now it's going to be Yisrael, in that sense of, contained in that name, Yisrael, Israel, the sense of tension and striving and struggle and all those kinds of things.
And it's also interesting because it's actually, it can be quite confusing to new learners or readers of Torah, that Jacob's name changes sort of throughout the rest of his life. We see the Torah referring to him as Yaakov some places and Yisrael in other places. It's a funny thing. You can try to make sense of that. Like, why in certain places is he referred to as Yaakov and in other places as Yisrael? But the truth is that he's not only referred to Yisrael forevermore.
Yeah.
Which is different than Abraham.
It's really interesting. So maybe we could think of it like this. Maybe it's a progression. So maybe you first wrestle with yourself, and when you work that out, when you finish that process, then you need to wrestle with other folks, your relationships with others, and then you're prepared to wrestle with God from that point forward. I heard.
That's nice.
Let's just drop the mic. Let's end it right here.
No, you can't. Only because it gets so, I think, delicious after this.
It definitely, yeah. But just one other thing on that. This morning I'm driving up, and there's a song by Tedeschi Trucks Band, Tedeschi Trucks Band, and the song is called Simple Things, but the first line of the song is "Look in the mirror," and it's about what do you see when you look in the mirror. That's such a powerful idea to me.
It's so interesting. I always think of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, looking at the mirror, in the mirror. Jeremy's dancing with us.
The man behind the glass.
I know.
Is boogieing. You can't see that on camera, but.
So actually, Rabbi Schwartz, after this, though, I feel like it gets really interesting in a few different ways after this wrestling situation happens, and then we see it's time for the day to, the day breaks. It's a new day, and that's when Jacob sort of goes for this big encounter.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing, I think, because as I mentioned, he's prepared for war, but he's hopeful for reconciliation or peace.
Right.
And he goes, and I feel like what happens is he sends his messengers to basically say your brother's coming, and he's bringing all of these things and these people and these gifts, and then Esav comes out and says basically what's all the stuff, and he says this is this is for you, and Esav has I think one of those beautiful, actually there are two really beautiful parts to this. One is that Esav actually doesn't try to hurt him. He runs to him and he hugs him, and he kisses him, and he says, is that the moment where he says, to see your face is like seeing the face of God? I'm gonna look at it.
Take a quick peek.
Yeah. So he gets up there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at this really fast. So he says, right, please accept my present. This is Jacob. Okay, looking up, Jacob sees Esav coming with 400 men. He divided all of the camps, and Esav runs to greet him. So he runs, he embraces him, he falls on his neck, he kisses him, and they wept.
Right.
It's a beautiful, succession of words there. And then he says, who are these with you? Basically, introduce me to your family, right? And he said, they're the children. I've been really blessed. And then he said, what did you mean by bringing all of these people with you? And he said, and animals, I've done it to gain my Lord's favor. And then Esav, and I think this is so beautiful, says, I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours, which is so beautiful, right? The sense of enoughness, which you almost never see, right? Someone who's just taken your stuff not too long ago or decades ago is here, I'm going to give you gifts. It would be so reasonable for Esav to be thank you. You right. Sort of owe it to me. That should have been mine in the first place, but he doesn't. He says, I have enough, my brother. Let what's yours stay yours. And Jacob says, no, I pray you, if you do me this favor, accept for me this gift. And then Jacob says, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. And you have received me favorably. It's a very, very beautiful moment.
I think there's some ambivalence in the moment, which is how the tradition reads that, by the way. The Vayishlach in the text, which is, and he kissed him with all the dots, and the tradition makes a whole big deal about that. Was the kiss genuine? Was it not genuine? That whole, and I think it's interesting that they read ambivalence into it. But I also think it's interesting in that, to me, it's a continuation of this sense that I always have through this cycle of stories, that Jacob is the one who really struggles, while Esau's the one who's able to kind of move forward in a healthy way. So it seems like Esau's he's worked it out. He's okay, I can, I've let it go. I've let it go.
You don't need to repay me.
Don't need to repay me. I've made peace with all this business. like I've let it go. But Jacob is not, it seems like it's still festering in his mind,
Well, it's interesting what you say, I think. I did that, like, because, the tradition sort of accuses him of actually not kissing him, but biting him.
Right.
But,
Dracula.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that what's interesting about what you're saying, too, is that, like, Jacob, I feel like he's always hustling somehow.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Even here, like, he brings a whole entourage, and, he's like, look at all that I've got, and look at, like, I feel like he, I use the word hustle, but I also feel like he's working really hard to prove himself.
Yeah.
And to, like, prove his worthiness.
Yeah.
Whereas Esau feels like, I've got enough, I'm good. And there feels like there's something more settled.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I mean, I think that Jacob's always working an angle. He's always working an angle. He's always, it's parcel of his character.
But is that, I mean, there's sort of this, like, beautiful end moment, and then I want to ask you a question about that piece of Jacob. But the end moment is, I feel so happy in my soul every time I read this. I'm like, and the brothers reconciled. Like, it's a beautiful gift. But then you have this, like, additional moment that the Torah gives us a glimpse into what happens next, because one might think that maybe, like, and then they were good again, right? Two brothers, now they're, like, back in relationship, or, now who knows what the chapter ahead will bring. But what we see is that, Esau says to Jacob, like, come, let's travel together. And Jacob says to Esau, like, oh, no, like, you know what, like, got a lot of people, got a lot of wives that are nursing, got a lot of little kids and a lot of animals, and, like, we're just going slow. You go up on ahead. And
right.
Esau tries again. Like, literally, like, he's like, don't worry, I'll slow down. We'll travel with you. I can even help you out, And again, Jacob is like, no.
Right.
And you sort of have this moment where, like, they may have reconciled, but you sort of feel Esau again being hopeful about what could be, and Jacob again sort of feeling like, no, actually, I'm not really in it for the long run.
Right.
Or,
yeah, I mean, and also, families, right? And in our business, we see this all the time. And sometimes you say, listen, maybe you're not going to be buddy with your brother or sister or whatever. But hopefully, when you need to deal with each other, you can do so respectfully, and that you care for each other and try to support each other. Yeah. But you're not going to be getting together and having dinner together on a weekly basis. And that seems to be the way that Esau and Jacob work it out. You can read in Jacob's response to in Esau's invitation as a sense of, like, I'm still afraid, and I don't want to. You go ahead, and I'm happy to just, now that we've had this encounter, like, I'll stay back here.
That's so interesting. You think it's fear?
I read it that way. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. But the other piece of it is, also, like, we have our author needs to move the action along, right? And our author at this point is not interested in Esau, really. And so from this point forward, for the most part, we leave Esau behind. And now we're going to focus on Jacob, and we're going to get to Joseph and the sons, and that's going to be the rest of Genesis. And Dinah and all
right,
this. But it's all going to be about Jacob.
So it's interesting. I don't read it as fear. I just sort of feel like Jacob. I don't know. I feel like he just isn't, like, he's just not interested.
Maybe.
I don't know. He's, like, doing his own thing, creating his own, family, his own tribes. But it is also interesting that he has a major, like, he has to develop his family. His family is going to, sort of be the basis for the Jewish people still to come. Like, I think it's, you are right. He's going to grow, I think, from the experience. But I feel like who he is as a person is so complex.
Oh, so complicated, yeah. And I think, continues to wrestle with that really for the rest of Genesis, and which will also be the rest of Jacob's own life.
And he has such highs and lows, Jacob, right? Like, we're going to keep following him, and that's, I think, one of the exciting parts of Genesis. But he's like so blessed, and then, you know, one might say like so cursed. I mean, I don't want to say he's so cursed, but like then he has like huge challenges. You know, his life is sort of like a lot of extreme.
Yeah. And so actually, that's a good place, I think, to end the conversation on Vayeshev, and we're going to be going to to end Vayishlach, and we'll go to Vayeshev because he ends on a high here, right? He's in good shape, but we're going to see next week that it doesn't last for too long. All right.
For Jacob.
Rabbi Saroken, thanks as always.
Thanks, and if you want to keep on learning with us, we're going to be here each and every week. You can definitely go to Vayishlach in any, you can Google it or you can look it up in any Tanakh. And of course, if you want to come study with us ever, we'd be always happy to have you join us in any of our classes on Saturdays. Take care. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.